Do your brakes look like this? Then they probably look like this. Or they might look like this. And if they look like that, they probably sound like this. Hi, welcome to the On the Ground Auto channel. Today we're replacing the hub bearings on a 1997 F350 4x4. Most of these old style trucks will be a similar procedure. And even if you don't want to replace the bearings and you just want to replace the rotor, you're still going to have to take all of this apart. So let's get started. Step 1, remove your caliper. Caliper pin bolts will either be 14s or 13s, depending on what brand of caliper was on here. These ones are 14s. Pry your caliper off with a pry bar. Put it out of the way. Remove your caliper bracket. It's a 22mm socket. Remove the locker on your hub. There's 3 bolts. It's a T25. And it just pops right off. Remove the lock ring holding the hub in place. How I do this is I stick one screwdriver under one end, pop this out. This is going to move. Use your knee to hold it in place. The hub slides right out. This is what it looks like. Inside here, you have a series of rings that all slide off once you pull this off. Using a pair of snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring that's holding everything in place. You should be able to pick out the rest with your fingers. When you store them, stack them in the order they came out. So if you forget the order, it won't matter. Hub lock nut removal tool. Remove the first lock nut. There's a lock ring that you pull out, either with a pick, a screwdriver, or the sides of your fingers. And then inside there, there is another lock nut that gets removed with this tool. This whole assembly now will come right off. If you plan on reusing your bearings, don't drop them in the dirt. I don't plan on reusing these, so it doesn't matter. Put the hub and rotor assembly on a table and smash out the wheel studs. In theory, you should be able to just smash this off. In practice, since these trucks are all really old, it's probably going to be seized, and you're going to have to come up with some MacGyver way of holding this in place enough to separate it. I'm using my plow. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try it. So, after failing to move it with wood, I just had to accept it. I hit the end of it with a hammer. If you deform this at all, you can shave it down with a grinder. The seal will still fit. That's all that really matters. There we go. Junk rotor, goodbye. Hub assembly. To remove this seal, stick this in an extra rim. Don't do this with an alloy. You'll break it. Stick a screwdriver in there. Pop it out. Of course, you don't want to do this if you're trying to reuse the bearing. After you determine if you need to clean up the edges from hitting it with a hammer, you gotta clean out this inside. You gotta make sure that you get everything out of here. You do not want specks of dirt and shit inside your bearing. Make sure you're not on a dirty surface. I use a white t-shirt so I can see the stuff that's coming off of it. Not to touch the edge. Like outside right here, because it's all rusty and shitty. It's very important that you do not get specks of dirt or rust in here, because if you do, it'll ruin your bearings and you won't know right away. The larger bearing goes on the outside. How I do these is I do this. Stick this in here so it's nice and greasy. Spin it around so grease gets in. All of these rollers. Over greasing is better than under greasing, because it'll just squeeze out into the middle part of this hub. Next we put in our wheel seal. They make a special tool for this. I don't have it, and the odds are most of you probably don't either. You got to be really careful with this. If you use a piece of wood like I'm doing, make sure it's not a splintery one, and make sure it's clean of all debris first. Use a rubber mallet. Don't use a metal hammer, because that could end really badly. Now that it's partially in, tap it gently, because if you tap it really hard, it's gonna kink in on one side. Have some patience when you do this, because if you hit this too hard, it's gonna go in oblong, and then you're gonna have to buy it again. Sometimes a metal hammer is necessary. This particular one it is, because I could not get this to go in any other way. You want to use a plastic hammer when possible, but my plastic hammers just aren't cutting it today. Once you have your seal on, next step is to attach the rotor. It lines up with the holes on the hub. It might fit flush, it might not. Don't hit the edge of your rotor with a hammer. It'll warp it. Put your 8 studs through the holes. You're going to want to put like a stick bag in there so you don't get any dirt in when you smash these with a hammer. I use one of these. Do it in a crisscross pattern, just like you were attaching lug nuts. Again, they won't go in all the way right off the bat. And now your hub is almost complete. Next, you want to clean all of this off. Make sure that you get no dirt on this whatsoever. In case any of you make the common mistake of forgetting the order that these go back together in, it's this guy first, then this one, then the thin washer, slightly thicker washer, the toothed one, and then the clip that goes over the end. Pack your front bearing. It's the same procedure as the other one. Bearing goes in here. Alright, lightly grease the spindle shaft. Don't overdo it or you're going to have a hard time putting this on. And take your assembly. Once you get it to where it's the back bearing is in, push the front one in and then push the whole thing back as far as it goes. If you get lucky, it'll go right on. Which we got very lucky. It's the other side. Did not go on this easy. Alright, next you want to put your inner lock ring on. This is the one with the little tabby thing. Make sure your little tab is in one of those holes. Otherwise it won't fit on correctly. Thread this on by hand. If it gives you any resistance, make sure it's not cross-threading, because it's a very bad day if it is. It's very greasy. It's hard to hold. Alright, next step is to do your hub torque sequence. Have somebody else spin the hub around so it keeps moving. Make sure this is in the correct position. And torque this nut down to 50 foot-pounds. That'll help you set the bearings. Do that faster, please. Alright. Once you do it to 50 foot-pounds, don't use your torque wrench in reverse. That's how they break. Line this back up. Alright, stop doing that. As long as it moves, that's all that matters. Yeah, don't do that anymore. Back off a quarter of a turn. I usually go in the middle so I can accurately measure a quarter of a turn, which would be right there. And once you back off a quarter of a turn, go down slightly so it's a little bit snug. Make sure you're still moving. And that is the first part of your torque sequence. If it's hard to move, it's just because you have new grease in there. It'll loosen up over time. All right, next you put in your lock ring. The little tab that's on the inside of this goes into one of these holes. Sometimes you're gonna have to move the lock nut again. Let's see how lucky we are. They usually don't want to go in right away. Wow. That fit on exactly into that hole. So now we're going to take our next lock nut piece. This is the outer lock nut. Thread this on by hand. Make sure it doesn't cross thread. If it does, stop and back off if there's resistance, which there is right now. So, I got dirt in my tool. If you get dirt in this tool, stop what you're doing and clean it, because then you're going to get dirt in here. Tighten this as much as possible by hand. This outer lock nut gets torqued between 160 and 200 pounds. 200 is excessive. I'm going to do 170. That's what I did on the other side. Because you don't want to over tighten these. If you over tighten these, they will explode after a lot of driving. Have your friend spin the wheel around while you're torquing this. Spin it fast, because it's going to provide it's going to give you resistance. Perfect. Awesome. Next, you put your thin washer on, then your thicker washer, then your toothed washer. The tooth washer lines up with the teeth on the axle half shaft. And then after that, you put the C-clamp on. Then install your snap ring. These are kind of annoying to do. It'll take you a few tries. After that, put your locker back on. Shit. Next, you put your caliper back on. This caliper bracket is new. We're replacing it. That's why we're doing this to begin with. Whenever you put calipers back together, always put anti-seize or grease on your hardware so they don't lock up in the future. Put some anti-seize on the edge of your pads as well. Be careful not to touch the inside of them, or you're gonna get it everywhere like I just did. Alright, so the thing about these is these lugs are not going to seat all the way until you torque them with it on the ground, because they're studs going through the rotor and the hub. So you're going to gun these on as much as you can in a crisscross pattern and then torque them. Torque in a star pattern, well, a crisscross pattern because there's 8 lugs, to 150 foot-pounds. See how I need much more turns? That's because I'm sandwiching the rotor and the hub together. So So I'm actually going to have to do some crisscrossing without it beeping.